Hello, everybody. Welcome to DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. My name's Brandon Adams, and it is good to have you with us today. A lot of recruiting information on the way. We'll get a chance to say hello to Jeff Sintel. We had Jeff on the show twice last week. It seems like it's been forever now since we've had him on, so I'm looking forward to catching up with him and getting a lot of recruiting information from him. I'm also looking forward to talking to all of you as well. We'll take a lot of your comments on both Facebook and YouTube. We'll do the fun stuff related to recruiting. We'll kind of talk about where we are on the pathway towards college football eventually returning. We'll have to get into the Deandre Baker stuff a bit, too. I really don't know what to say that beyond just horrible circumstances seemingly surrounding Baker at the moment. So we'll deal with that in some form or fashion before we're done today. And as I said before, just glad to have you with us on the Friday. Hopefully we'll allow you to get your weekend started off right with us here today. And by the way, speaking of heading towards a weekend with Kroger, one of the things that makes shopping fun at Kroger and frankly restoring some peace of mind during a time in which supermarkets are more top of mind for us than ever before, the way in which Kroger has made the shopping experience easier and I would say better. When you go into the stores, one of the things that you see are the cleanliness of the aisles and the way the shelves have been well stocked. The entire experience for me has been incredibly enjoyable, and I'm always thankful for Kroger because they help feed my family and my kids eat like there's no tomorrow. So I'm always thankful that Kroger helps me feed them. But I found myself expressing sort of an extra level of gratitude during this coronavirus time that we've dealt with. And I think that Kroger is now taking that up to the next level there as well, because they're now offering free pickup. That means, if you value your health and who doesn't, and you want to maintain an extra degree of social distancing, you can order your stuff online and schedule a time to show up and pick it up, and you drive there to the parking lot. The Kroger folks bring it right out there to you. Just an incredibly convenient way to get the goods, the food, everything else that your family needs to survive right now. So our friends at Kroger are doing great work on that, and we appreciate them bringing DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, to us here today. I also appreciate Jeff Sintel being with us as well. In fact, let me get ready to say hello to Jeff Sintel right now here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Jeff, a lot of recruiting talk to get into here on this Friday. We appreciate you being with us, and I hope you're doing well.
Hey, Brandon, man, happy Friday to everybody. Everybody get outside this weekend. And good message there about Kroger, Brandon. That's the definition of an essential worker right now for all of us.
No doubt about that. All right. I want to talk some recruiting here, and I thought you had a good update yesterday as it involved five-star linebacker Smile Mondon. We showed the video on our program a little earlier this week, and sometimes these Twitter videos, things like that, can be difficult for me to decipher, but I'm actually kind of proud of myself on this one. I believe I read this one well, that it was commitment day coming 6, open spot, obviously here in the year of our Lord 2020. And I took that to mean, well, it looks like he's committing in June, but we may not quite know when in June. And after the report that you had up there at DawgNation.com yesterday, that would seem to be confirmed by some folks close to Mondon on that. So I guess, Jeff, bring us up to date on what we do and do not know about the five-star linebacker here at the moment.
Well, first of all, Brandon, do you have the technology beginning on June the 1st to create a Smile Mondon commitment day countdown? You're going to tick it down one day every week, right?
Not a bad idea. Yeah, not a bad idea to put a date in that blank at some point in time for Mr. Mondon.
Hey, Brandon, just to be sportsman, do you have an idea when you think Mondon would commit, or what do you think would be the most convenient commitment time for you?
Well, listen, earlier is always better when it comes to a five-star like that, although we need content in July as well. But when it comes to a player of this caliber, I'll take it when I can get it, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure. So I think the things we learned about Mondon is, I think that's, and I don't want to supersize this story because everybody has things that matter to them that they're not doing now during the quarantine, or their ways and walks of life have been affected. But I really believe Smile Mondon was a kid that wanted to, let's face it, Brandon, Paulding County High School. This is the amount of, since I've been covering recruiting, these are the amount of five-star players that Paulding County High School has had. And this was kind of the glory days for this Dallas area program, where they had a 4th-round draft pick in the NFL at receiver earlier this year by the Redskins. They've got ESPN rates Mondon as the nation's #1 outside backer. You guys have been reading DawgNation for the last 7, 8, 9, 10 months. Georgia's always viewed him as an inside linebacker because of his skill set. And he really wanted to stretch it out, which meant there probably would have been 120 coaches that would have came by his spring practice. There were 70 last year. They got some other good players on the Paulding County team that maybe not good enough to go to a Georgia or Clemson or Oklahoma, but they're definitely good enough to be recruited by FCS and lower tier FBS football. And it was a way for them to keep coming around and keep taking a look, putting exposure on his players, but his teammates. But, this is just not possible anymore. I think the major recruiting news of the week, I want to make sure everybody hears this on your program too, was the Ncaa has extended the recruiting dead period through the end of June. Now, there will be another reading of the green for all us golfers out there. There'll be another reading of the green out on May 27th to see whether they extend it how far into July. But he wants to do it in June, and he doesn't really have the ability now to go scramble for those last-minute visits to kind of fill in the blanks of his blank, literally, for his recruiting story. And I think the big thing folks are going to know is we've got to follow the past visits. This is Corona recruiting corollaries or whatever. He's never been to LSU. LSU's in his top 4. He's been to Tennessee 3 times. He's been to Auburn 3 or 4 times, and he's been to Georgia 5 times. The key thing, and this has been consistent, and every time I've ever talked to Shmile Munden Jr. and his people around him, is that the relationship with the assistant coach is going to be crucial, and I think Georgia's done a very good job there.
So there's a lot for me to unpack on the basis of what you just said. And I think some of this is even, taking it beyond just the recruitment of Mondin here for a moment. The position thing is interesting. You mentioned, is Mondin an inside, is an outside linebacker? There was a time in which if we were talking on this program about someone that the major recruiting services listed as a strong side defensive end, it almost always stood to reason that a school like Georgia would want to see that player add some weight and become a defensive tackle. That was just kind of the way that typically sort of went. Are we now in the scenario where if I see a player listed by the recruiting service as an outside linebacker, there's a pretty good chance that a place like Georgia, someone who's athletic enough to be rated highly on the outside linebacker scale, there's a very good chance that Georgia sees him as an inside linebacker because Georgia wants inside linebackers as athletic as the average program's outside linebackers?
Yeah, I think this is one thing I hold to be very true, and this will stand up in front of, 50 citizens or naysayers or trolls on the internet. If you can't run, you can't play linebacker for Georgia. You can't play defense for Georgia. Maybe Jordan Davis is the world. It would be the notable exception. I think of guys like Reggie Ragland, Brandon. I think of guys maybe even like a Reuben Foster at some point. Those thumpers, those A-gap and B-gap linebackers, I just don't think they exist anymore for the Georgias of the world. And you've got Munden as a guy that can stay on the field. He could rush the passer. I mean, he's a guy that the athletic resume here is pretty vast. He runs jet sweeps for Paulding County. He was good for about 80 yards, 70, 80 yards, 7, 8 tackles most games. Rangy sideline to sideline linebacker. And when you're triple jumping 48, 49 feet in high school, and you're going to go play inside linebacker in the SEC, then you're going to have a very elite athlete there, especially with all these tempos and when guys try to expose backers. And you want players that can stay on the field and play at a high level and provide plus plays, areas that coordinators can't just attack. And Shmile Munden certainly fits that bill.
All right, let me give you a crackpot theory, and there's a very good chance you may tell me I'm 100% wrong, which is why I'm bringing it up. If I am wrong, I want to know. You mentioned the extension of the dead period for recruiting, and obviously we think of Kirby Smart as one of these coaches that wants to be recruiting anytime that he can. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that the extension of the dead period a little deeper into the summer may actually be kind of a good thing for Georgia. It certainly seems like Georgia's got a good handle on how it wants to communicate with its recruits while no one's taking visits. Georgia just seems to be good at the personal communication stuff, the not overselling the program from a recruiting standpoint. They seem to have that figured out. But even beyond that, Jeff, we're about to enter into a scenario where sometime in the month of June, it would seem that Georgia and the rest of the SEC is going to get back to the business of trying to put a football team together for the upcoming year. Isn't that enough for right now? The idea of getting ready to play and getting ready to start practicing, finding out who's in shape and who's not. Isn't that a pretty full meal to chew on, at least for the moment? And if the recruiting dead period is extended deeper into the month of June or potentially even longer than that, then in this one particular instance, isn't that kind of okay because of the other challenge that's out there of on a very truncated schedule trying to get ready to play a football season this fall?
Yeah, Brendan, I just don't think it's safe and possible. I wouldn't call you a crackpot. I think that's probably reading the break of a 9-foot putt probably here, Brandon, because think about this. I think the best way that the University of Georgia and other power recruiting schools can recruit right now is they can recruit by the business of football. And that might be the edits that are popping out. That might be the highlights that are popping out. That might be clearly what Georgia's done over the last 2 weeks is having their own prospects and maybe even on some of their current players tweeting at or, sending out those Apex Predator. Brendan, I'm waiting for you on your Facebook and YouTube program platforms to replace the Top Fan with Apex Fan.
I like that.
Something like that. Did everybody see the cool edit on social media where I thought this was coming way back in March for the UGA graphics team is so good where there was one from Brock Vandegrift who tweeted out something with Brock Bowers. And he's like, Brock for 6. I can get used to the sound of that. Yeah. And it's, Brian, it's just so complicated. Like, let's say this, like, there's no way camps can happen. And there's probably no way visits can happen because I think these coaches and the staff at Georgia are going to have so much on their mind about hurry up, getting ready in a very short amount of space to get their football team ready for the season. That how do you host recruits on campus with things like that? How do you bring a bunch of players in from different parts of the country? Some of the things that I've heard about what will happen when recruiting comes back is the running backs will stay with the running backs. Everybody will be sequestered. Everybody will have masks. Social distancing will apply. And that's when everybody feels good about kind of re-energizing or kind of reinstalling a lot of these recruiting staples back into the way people recruit. And I think, remember when Kirby Smart said that back in March, gosh, that seems so long ago, that really concerned about their families and their situations and their health of the players right now. I think when it comes around to mid-June, I think the major concern will be about their football teams. And I think Georgia's handling it the right way. Like what we said on our Hedges program this week, also sponsored by Kroger, was that I think what Georgia's looking for and what they're trying to do is they're not going too fast with this. They got 7 commitments. I mean, I think if Georgia wanted to have 15 commitments on the board right now, they probably could put them up on the board, but there's no rush. There's no reason to. Part of that is because this is a buyer's market, and I use that term very loosely. Let me say an evaluator's market for a lot of these recruiting programs where if they're not sure how a kid runs, if they're not sure how much weight he's put on, if they're not sure if he's twitchy enough to play a certain position, if they're not sure that they only need to take 2 receivers right now rather than 1 tight end and maybe 2 tight ends rather than 3 receivers, there's no hurry for them to do that because I think they're in a good spot with most of their major targets.
I want to talk about something one of our YouTube commenters has brought up. Before that, just a simple question here to close out this portion of our discussion. How would you describe Mondon's current relationship with Georgia in comparison to his other top schools?
Yeah, so I think the one you got to think about, remember LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, and Georgia. Well, he's never been to LSU, Brandon. So how in the world can LSU be like if Coach O and the Tigers defensive staff pull a 5-star away from Georgia during COVID-19 recruiting, and he's never even been on campus? I mean, that takes the cake. So I really think that the schools that everyone's thinking about right there are Auburn, Georgia, and Tennessee. Now, I know you read everything, Brandon, or at least you have these little birds that come into your ears and tell you about everything that's going on. I would be shocked if a silent commitment has been made. That's just basically I'm relaying the words from his head coach. All these things about there's a video out there just waiting to be released of, Amarius Mims and Shemile Munden all committing to Tennessee this week. I don't think that's hashtag real news or real news to look forward to. I think all these schools have done a pretty good job, very good job of recruiting Shemile Munden. It's amazing how things have changed. I just want to tell you, in early March, Shemile Munden had 1 visit planned, and that was to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's not even in his top 4. And now he was planning to commit in November, December, and now he's going to do it in June blank of 2020. That just shows you how radically things have changed within that whole landscape of Brandon. We had this point. I want to make sure your audience gets this too. Since COVID-19, whether you want to call it March 11th, 12th, 13th, my buddy Bud Elliott of 24/7 Sports, he had the data. He had the databases to cull this from. Brandon, there have been 424 commitments since March 11th, March 12th, March 13th.
And that's just Tennessee alone.
Yeah, especially that. I don't know how many 3 stars are left, Brandon.
Ooh, I know that.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
But you look at the number of people that have committed through the first week of May in this class, Brandon. I think that number was 607. And when you add the people who have committed in the 18 class, the 19 class, and the 20 class up until the first week of May, you really only have like 780 commitments through that point. So I'm going to say this, brother. Those decommitments, they're coming, and they're going to be fast and furious.
And then Memphis Dog, watching us on YouTube, also said that it's a shame to see another linebacker. We're talking about Smile Mondon. Looks like Barrett Carter, as we've discussed, kind of trending the direction of Clemson. With that in mind, hard not to notice lately, to go back to some of the social media editing and things like that, hard not to notice the way in which Georgia seems to have intensified its recruitment, at least publicly, of Xavier Sorey lately.
Yeah, I think he was getting the happy birthday commitments. It's really funny. And recruiting is like, I'm trying to think sometimes how I have to explain things to my kids sometimes. Brandon, when you throw you skip a stone or you throw a pebble into a pond, and when that pond lands, there are ripples that go out in every direction.
Sure.
I think the causal effect here is Xavier Sorey maybe kind of got the feeling maybe December, January that Georgia was really a Barrett Carter school and really, all in on Barrett Carter. And I think as those things have shifted, maybe Xavier Sorey now feels like he's the alpha, the apex predator recruiting target for Georgia. And, it's kind of control V, Brandon, how you can say a lot of the things about Xavier Sorey that you do about Smile Mondon. Xavier would probably be an inside linebacker for Georgia. Xavier is a guy that has incredible athleticism on his film. I don't think he's as polished a player as Barrett Carter. You see some of those dunks he's throwing down on his film. Those have been catching our eyes for quite some time as on the basketball court. And it really feels like now the shift has turned, and let me just say the tide has turned to Xavier Sorey Jr., to whereas maybe Alabama was feeling great about Xavier Sorey Jr. until Georgia decided, let's see what we can do in building a greater relationship there with a young man out of Niceville. I think it's Graceville, Florida, Brandon, and it's one of the smaller communities in the state of Florida you'll ever come across.
So by the time a lot of people hear this today on radio podcast, we may know the destination of Mario Williams, the top wide receiver, or among the top wide receiver prospects for the class of 2021. It seems fairly obvious he's not going to Georgia. Jeff, what I've said on our show in the past is that the work that has been done by Georgia the last couple of cycles, 2 big additions to the 19 class with Blaylock and Pickens, ton of signees, I think it's 5 in total for the class of 2021, class of 2020. It seems like maybe not as much early playing time to sell anymore for 2021, that Georgia's having a hard time breaking through with some of those wide receivers. Obviously, Ajayi Hall goes to Alabama. Mario Williams seems headed elsewhere here today. We'll wait and see on Deion Colsey. That's obviously a name that Georgia fans have circled because he's from Athens, recently decommitted from Notre Dame. How has the huge number of receivers that Georgia's recently brought into the program potentially impact the guys that it'd probably still like to get for the class of 2021?
Yeah, for me, Brandon, I don't even know if you'd include Ajayi Hall in there as well. He's a guy that needed more development and needed to be seen to become a take on Georgia's board. I think it's something that the wide receiver position, Brandon, you might want to give us a Tiger Woods fist pump when you hear this, but I think now it's quickly becoming an area where if a guy can't play for Georgia within 1 to 2 years or push the starters in year one, then perhaps Georgia does not need to be recruiting that receiver anymore, especially after what they signed in the 2020 cycle. Here's what I think happened with Mario Williams. Georgia missed an opportunity during spring practice and it's G-Day to showcase what they're doing differently. Mario Williams would have been easy for him to get back on campus and see Georgia at some point during spring practice or a G-Day. He could see Georgia throwing it around in practice. He could see the concepts and the things that Georgia would be doing with Todd Monken. And he could see for himself, and he would have more evidence about, hey, dude, Monken here, NFL coordinator, NFL resume, throws it around a lot. Things will be different between the hedges in Athens. I think without that visual and that reinforcement that was lost during G-Day, I think Georgia maybe lost a chance to really stay as a major stakeholder in Mario Williams recruiting.
Speaking of receivers and guys in the 2019 class, you wrote at DawgNation.com this week a bit about Dominic Blaylock's attempt to return from a very serious knee injury at the end of last season. What did you find in your reporting, Jeff?
Yeah, so that was very interesting. It's a little bit of a history lesson, and we just kind of going to go ahead and, sometimes stereotypes and labeling folks in this life are very, very short-sighted. But when you want to think about Blaylock, you think of him as one of those athletic marvels, one of those freaks. Freaks is a good word now. You think of Adrian Peterson, you think of really fast healers like Julio Jones, and there's a clear example, Brandon, from his high school days where he had an ankle injury sliding into first. Brandon, Dominic's the type of athlete that I think if he wanted to be a baseball player, he would be a second or third round draft pick at the lowest in Major League Baseball coming out of high school. And I think he can shoot, probably roll out of bed and shoot 80 on the golf course. He's that type of athlete, but he's also a very fast healer. And there's a story where maybe the doctors thought he would be out 6, 7 months, 8 months with a broken fibula that he suffered in the spring of 2017. Well, he came back and was ready to play really game one in August, on August the 19th, August the 25th during his junior season. And not only that, he played well. He was a difference maker. He had over 100 yards receiving, and he made a future Auburn signee. He made him miss on a one-on-one play that decided the game. And really, that was his first game back, shaking off a lot of rust. And those that know Dominic Blaylock very, very well, and those that have kind of been around him right now, Brandon, there's some Instagram chatter where I think there's something about Dominic where I've been told he was running against a friend that plays baseball against Clemson. You kind of hear the same things about his recovery underneath the surface here, Brandon, that you heard about Nick Chubb and how he was going to be ready really fast. Reminder here, folks, it's just an ACL injury, Sounds weird to say that for Dominic Blaylock. And his high school coach painted a very strong picture that knowing Blaylock, knowing the way he works, knowing his athletic history and bouncing back from injury, the toughness factor there, he believes that Dominic Blaylock will be back quicker than anybody expects and be contributing for Georgia this year. And he even said he was willing to run some gassers on it as far as he would make that bet about Blaylock's ability to be up for the 2020 season.
Jeff, we appreciate your time here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We hope you get ready for a great weekend, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you on our program again very soon as well.
All right, guys, have a great weekend. Everybody stay safe and, stay together out there. We're all going to get through this, and good hanging out with you today, Brandon.
Yeah, really good stuff from Jeff Sentell. We appreciate him being a part of the program, and now we'll move on and get a chance for you to weigh in on your comments. And obviously one of the things we'll have to get into more is the Deandre Baker situation. I was blown away by the details, the allegations that are out there against Baker. And if you're not aware, there is a warrant for his arrest. He and another NFL player were allegedly a part of, like a card game gone wrong that led to an allegation of robbery and a gun being involved. And obviously, Baker gets his day in court like anybody else. We don't know all the facts, all the details of this, but the situation as it has been described certainly does not paint a rosy picture for Baker. And what are you supposed to say about it? I mean, it's terrible. I mean, I just hate it. I hate it. It's awful. You hope it's not true. But that's the situation that he's dealing with. And I can only imagine how bad the feeling will be eventually if this ends up being true and this ends up being the kind of thing that he deals with. I can only imagine how painful that must be going forward, knowing that you just really had the world at your full control. The kind of money you get as part of being a first-round draft pick, NFL career, ahead of you. To think that you put all that in jeopardy by an act of your own doing it's got to be a terrible feeling if these charges end up being true. And boy, I tell you, so whatever he's dealing with, I hope he gets the help that he needs. I hope to be able to hear this was all some gigantic misunderstanding. Not even sure if that's possible, but you hope that be the case. I mean, the actual details of this, whether it be, allegations of Lamborghini getaway cars, fancy parties with all these very expensive watches. In some ways, it's kind of a reminder of just how boring my life is. The fact that, even this description of the events is half the time I'm not even watching stuff that interesting on television, much less actually, living through and allegedly experiencing that in real life. So Baker was the guy that I loved in Georgia. And Baker was the guy that I wished well as he headed to the New York Giants. Baker's connection to South Florida, a part of the country where he's very proud to have been from. It's something I've used over and over again to celebrate the fact that Georgia has also gotten other elite defensive backs from South Florida as well. There's a lot about Deandre Baker on this show that I've held up as a banner for what I want Georgia football to be known as. He was the Thorpe Award winner, after all. So, admittedly, I've been a fan of his. I don't know much about him other than what I've seen from him on the football field. And I just hope in some form or fashion that the details of this situation, as they've been described, turn out not to be true. Because if so, it is not potentially a good situation. I was doing a little bit of reading on this. And I'm not a lawyer, so please take this with a grain of salt. But, some of the stuff that I've seen would suggest that to be caught in a felony situation in the state of Florida while using a gun, based on the way that I've read the law, and I'm not a lawyer, so take this with a grain of salt, but there's certainly a way in which that can make things even worse for you. So I really hope that the situation as it's been described, and you can read more about the details at DawgNation.com if you want to, but I really hope the situation as it has been described is not the way things actually are, because if so, Baker could be in a good bit of legal trouble, So we'll get some comments and let folks talk about whatever they want to. Michael Webb checking in today. Appreciate that. Good to have you here. Appreciate everybody being here and being a part of the program here today. Andrew Ray says unless charges are dropped or changed, he's looking at 5 years in federal prison. Phil Rogers says it could be 10. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I just don't know a lot about this kind of stuff. You hear about one thing and it ends up being sometimes something different. But I mean, I heard, like I said, I have no idea what's true, but I heard just the act of committing a felony while holding a gun in and of itself is worth 10 years. I don't know if that can be pled down or something like that, nor do I know that if somehow the people that, whose reports led to the initial police report, if they decide not to press charges, does the police still move forward with all this? I don't know any of that kind of stuff. I'm not necessarily exactly on the crime beat, but just based on the little bit of reading that I did, you certainly get a pit in your stomach for how serious this could potentially be for him. And it's a shame, man. It's a shame for anybody. A shame, especially for a guy that we all root for. So I got no problem telling you. I had some rival fans kind of coming at me last night on this. I'm not sure what they expect me to say on this. If he did this, I obviously can't condone that. Obviously, I've been a fan of his before. And I hope he gets his day in court. I hope he has good legal representation. I hope he uses every resource available to him to fight against these charges. But if he did it, that's not good. So I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to say about that beyond that. Let's see what else is going on. Yeah, Bama Boy apparently has heard the same thing that I've heard. You think of Florida as being a good state to live in if you're a legal gun owner, and I would say that's probably true. They seem to have, the best that I can tell, some, I guess fairly open laws when it comes to, legal gun ownership, but it's not a good place to commit a crime while holding a gun. Certainly doesn't seem to be anyway. By the way, Real Boss says when it comes to Todd Monken, he's going to get us some more help at the wide receiver. I love my dogs. I know my dogs. So Real Boss excited about the idea of more wide receiver help. I think the best way that Todd Monken can get more receivers for Georgia is create the kind of offense that receivers want to play for. A good freshman season from George Pickens alone is just not changing that. This is a position group and an offense, frankly, that I don't think has a great reputation. You can cite some examples where elite playmakers, at least guys that we thought of as potential elite playmakers, chose to go elsewhere. And their concerns or their skepticism about the Georgia offense factored heavily in that decision because they admitted that publicly. So that's why Todd Monken's here. Todd Monken's here to create an offense that looks fun to play in, that makes receivers want to be here. And even when you can't quite sell early playing time, you still have a good pitch to these recruits because they'll get a chance to eventually thrive in an offense that's built to make receivers thrive. Georgia, I mean, listen, nobody loves Georgia football more than I do, but sometimes you have to be honest. Georgia offensively has a horrible reputation nationally, horrible reputation. It's got to create itself as the kind of place that big-time quarterbacks, big-time receivers want to be a part of this offense. And so that's what the work of the upcoming season with Todd Monken's going to do. Dallas Schwartz checking in. Thanks for the kind words on the beard. Appreciate that. He says he's worried about USC and Bama getting it going to begin the month of September. Dallas obviously lives out in California, checks in on the show, and there's a growing sentiment among some that game's not going to be played. It's interesting to note that the principals involved, Greg Byrne, the Alabama athletic director, and the folks that lead the way there at USC, they're still operating if it is going to take place. Here's what I eventually think is going to happen, and my prediction's not worth very much in this, but I'll give it to you nonetheless. I think eventually the city of Los Angeles softens its stance on its lockdown. I think that for the good or for the bad, and who knows what's the right health decision and what's not, but for the good or for the bad, eventually it's hard to be the lone holdout. You saw this with NASCAR and the PGA Tour. When the sports world started shutting down, they were going to try to hold their events. They thought they could do it from a social distancing safe way. And yet eventually, if you're the only people in the world trying to do live sports, eventually that's just too much pressure. I think the same way that everyone felt the need to join the pack in shutting down the world, I think the same kind of thing will be true as the world opens back up. It's one thing to be out there and be the most in favor of lockdowns for now, but when you truly are the only one left still doing it, whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision, it's just kind of hard to be the only one. So eventually my prediction is LA softens its stance. I think that paves the way for the Pac-12 to begin its college football season at the same time as everybody else. That may be a prediction doomed to be wrong, but it's my prediction nonetheless. Memphis Dog also said he heard that the game might get canceled. There are plenty of people out there who say it will be. Colin Cowherd has said that. Paul Feinbaum, I believe, has said that. So some people with some big followings have certainly said that. My sneaking suspicion is it's still too early. It's too early to see right now. Josiah Hurt, going back to the subject of the Georgia wide receiver, says, to be fair, we got a lot of our wide receiver recruits last cycle because of how poorly the group performed. They will only last so long, though. Hopefully this group is a catalyst to future strong wide receiver classes. Yeah. Josiah, I think that can be true, that reputations for the better, and when it comes to recruiting, because of how fast the cycles spin, it can be changed just like that. You let a George Pickens, who was I think a very successful freshman receiver. It's really weird that in the midst of a season in which the Georgia receiving core overall left a lot to be desired, Pickens had as good a freshman season as almost anyone could hope to have. Imagine if he then takes the next step with his development in year two. And then, as Josiah said, a lot of the receivers who are here came here because of the promise of early playing time, because the group had underperformed on the field in 2019. Let a couple of those guys really pop for you. All of a sudden then, if the Mungan offense hums along the way that I think that might be able to, all of a sudden then you're making an entirely different pitch to a recruit. You're recruiting from a position of strength. I mean, and it's much the same way that Georgia's recruited offensive linemen. Georgia, when it comes to recruiting offensive linemen, can't promise you early playing time, but it could say, we can get you to the NFL. You saw 2 offensive tackles drafted in the first round this year. Same thing with running backs. When a guy like Kendall Milton comes to Georgia, as impressive as he, was in high school, Georgia can't necessarily promise, hey, come here, you'll be the leading rusher your freshman season, because a guy like DeAndre Swift, who I think has a chance at a very good NFL career, was no better than third string his first season. So you can't really sell early playing time the running back position, but you can sell RBU. You can sell, be a part of a great pedigree of former running backs and be a part of a pipeline into the National Football League. It's recruiting from a position of strength. I don't believe that Georgia recruits the wide receiver position from that same position of strength. But if the guys that it brought in by probably suggesting a good deal of early playing time, if the guys they brought in 2020 to go along with what Pickens and Blaylock have become from the class of 2019, all of a sudden then you've got a little bit more of an established track record. When future recruits look on the field at Georgia, they can see someone who they think looks like them, and they can see someone who could be a fairly decent projection of what they might be able to do. And then you're recruiting the receiver position similarly to the way that you recruit other positions. I think Josiah brings up a pretty good point there on that. Hoop Dog, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. James Wade on the subject of Baker. Yeah, I mean, it's not good for him right now. And obviously, a lot of this does come on the heels of what was not necessarily the greatest rookie season. I would say that much the same way sometimes for freshman cornerbacks, rookies in the NFL, you have a chance to overcome that. But obviously, there's going to be a little bit of, this is just fact. There's going to be some PR ugliness for the Giants to deal with up there in the New York City area. because the guy that has allegedly gotten in trouble here was the guy that was already feeling some criticism for the way that he performed last season. So from that standpoint, not good. From that standpoint, you got to admit it. Yeah, Robert Barnes, I agree with your take on this. Totally agree with that. Phil Rogers on the seriousness of the situation. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Robert Barnes says he can see the headlines now from all the teams that recruit against us. That BA from DawgNation Daily says the Dog offense is horrible. I didn't say horrible. I do think it's a reputation that has to be improved. And here's the one thing, Robert, that I hope that people can at least appreciate. Like, I'm not going to come on here and just like, I've said this a million times. Anybody who tells you 100% of what you want to hear, there's a 100% chance they're lying about something. You know, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you've always gotten. If Georgia tries to go out in 2019, I should say in 2020, I keep getting the year confused. If Georgia tries to go out there in 2020 with the same offensive philosophy, the same offensive style that it had in 2019, the results, I think, are not going to be pretty. I think that Georgia, led by Kirby Smart, ought to be commended for the, I would suggest, pretty bold changes the program seems to have undertaken over the course of the offseason. Bringing in Todd Monken looks like a departure for me from what Georgia's done in the past, and that's really good news. Bringing a guy like Buster Faulkner, I initially thought Faulkner might be one of the on-field coaches. He's going to be in an analyst role. I think he's a pretty sharp guy, really. I think he's an up-and-comer in the coaching ranks. I think that's something that Georgia ought to be commended for. And as we cast the narrative of why this is happening, I think it's important to be honest about that. For those of us that really want Georgia to win a national championship, I'm a fan. That's my hope in all of this. I'm not pretending to be a right down the middle objective. That's never been my thing. I'm someone who wants the best for Georgia. I would suggest that as someone like myself who wants the best for Georgia, the chances of that happening aren't improved by treating every decision that Smart has made as if he's some sort of infallible genius who never gets anything wrong. I do think Kirby held on too long to an offensive philosophy that wasn't working. And if you compare 2019 to 2018, Georgia, I think, moved farther away from national championship level. They went from losing close in the SEC championship game to getting blown out. They went from losing on the road to a top 10 team in LSU to losing at home to a team that only won 4 times. So, unfortunately, last season was not just a bad year for the offense. The struggles of the offense led to a regression of the program. Not the kind of thing that can't be corrected, but I respect my audience too much to be dishonest about what happened last year. Georgia got worse because the offense wasn't very good. That's why it recruited as many wide receivers as it recruited. It's why it hired Todd Monken. I think that's why it's brought in Jamie Newman. The dynamic potential that he brings to the table. And I'm hopeful the results are going to be great. But I'm not going to tell you that what happened last year was great for the program because it clearly wasn't. Andrew Ray says, how will Todd Monken use the tight ends? I think that's a really interesting question. Georgia's used 2 tight end sets a lot. I like 2 tight end sets. You would think of, in Monken's case, it might just stand to reason that he would use 1 tight end sets a little bit more. You know, does a guy like Trey McKitty, who had some stats at Florida State, who put up some numbers, does he have a bigger and better home in a Monken offense than he would have had in previous Georgia offense? Or guys like Ryland Goede and John Fitzpatrick, who've shown the ability, in Godey's case more in the high school level, Fitzpatrick's case, sometimes at Georgia, they've shown they can haul in the football. They can be athletic tight ends. Can one of those guys get really used? The one thing I think you're always going to see at the college level in comparison to the NFL level, you don't really see college quarterbacks go through 4 progressions very much. And for most teams, the tight end's never going to be the first or second read in most situations. So the college offenses, even the really prolific ones, aren't going to quite use tight ends as much as the NFL teams are. You just see a lot of NFL tight ends who catch a lot of balls were not used that same way in college. It's a huge difference between the actual sports. If you look at Monken, when he was last calling plays at the NFL level in 2018 with Tampa Bay Bucks, O.J. Howard got hurt, but prior to Howard getting hurt, Howard was actually enjoying a pretty good season. So from that standpoint, now Howard's a very talented tight end, a former 5-star prospect coming out of high school when he went to Alabama. But you saw that when Monken had an athletic tight end when he was healthy. That was the guy that he was looking to use. So how do you extrapolate that for what might happen here at Georgia? Probably don't really know, but that's at least one example. A couple more comments. We'll get ready to get out of here. By the way, I want to shout out my friends at Kroger again. The weather's going to be beautiful this weekend. I was out yesterday walking around. So nice. And there's obviously a lot of things right now that I wish I was doing out in public that I'm not doing, but we can still be outside and enjoy that, whether it be front porch, back deck, patio, whatever else. And Kroger right now has got some great savings to make that outside experience better for you. You can currently save up to 40% on patio table sets, outdoor swings, lanterns, and more when you go to your local Kroger. So you're there shopping for your groceries anyway. Check out the outdoor furniture they have too, because if you're going to be socially distant at home, why not do it in style with some really nice outdoor furniture, some patio sets, things like that. Check that out with my friends at Kroger and really make the outside of your home look a lot nicer and be a lot more fun to enjoy. A couple more comments. We'll get ready to go. James Wade asking what Auburn's going to do in 2020. I think Auburn's in a situation where I'm very down on kind of the bottom portion of the SEC West. I don't think Ole Miss is very good. I don't think Mississippi State's very good. I think Arkansas under Sam Pittman's due to get better, but that's probably a slow climb. So I think if you're looking to project a record for a team like Auburn, I think you look at 3 pretty easy wins on the schedule in your own division. Cross-division opponent in the SEC is obviously always Georgia. That's not a game I think Auburn's ready to win yet. Their out-of-conference game is North Carolina. I think UNC may be sneaky good. Almost beat Clemson a year ago. I think Sam Howell, there's a pretty good chance that when UNC and Auburn play, the better quarterback plays for North Carolina. I think Howell's probably a pretty good quarterback. UNC is not an easy win for Auburn right now. So I would say close to givens at the bottom part of the division will help you pad your win-loss record. You're not ready to beat Alabama on the road. It's been a while since Auburn's done that. You're not ready to beat Georgia. Auburn doesn't do that very much either. I'd be careful with UNC. I think A&M's better than Auburn, and I think the Auburn-LSU game is probably a toss-up. So that's about where I have Auburn right now. Trying to go 9-3. I think 9-3 is a possibility. I don't know that I see this as a 10-2 team right now because of what they lost on defense from a year ago. So I'd say 8-4 is probably a little disappointment. 9-3 is maybe about the right expectation with a possibility if everything breaks the right way of going 10-2. But it's going to be hard for them to get 10 because I think I see the 3 losses. I would say A&M, I would say Georgia, I'd say Alabama. That gets you to 9 right there in the regular season. So that's my take on that. Chili Vic says, I think I'm too down on LSU. Maybe I am. I did see some numbers the other day, Chili, where teams replacing the number 1 overall draft pick have actually done better than you might think over the course of the last few years. Now, Oklahoma kind of skews that because they've had a series of quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts following up on Murray, who followed up on Baker Mayfield. So they kind of break that curve a little bit. But replacing the number 1 pick has not been as hard for some teams to do as you might would have recently thought. That's obviously the task that awaits Miles Brennan. He's still got Jamar Chase to throw to. Let's see how it goes. I was so impressed with Joe Brady a year ago. I thought that Brady was just a brilliant offensive mind, and he helped more than Joe Burrow. As I said before, I thought he was a huge help to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Gave him a lot more room to run. I don't think that Scott Linehan was a bad hire at LSU as passing game coordinator, but I think replacing what Brady did is pretty difficult to do. So from that standpoint, I don't see LSU as a top national contender anymore. I do think Alabama's still better. I do believe A&M's still better, although admittedly, I think LSU has a chance to be better than Auburn. Maybe I'm wrong, but that, as clearly as I can state it, what my opinion is for right now. A couple more, we're going to get ready to go. By the way, rolling into our R.S. Andrews school down here, too. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. R.S. Andrews does all of those things for us. They can do all of those things for you as well. As I said before, it's warm. That means air conditionings are coming on, and if you're concerned that yours is not ready to make its way through the late spring and summer on the way, then get some peace of mind by getting your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com and get that $99 Smiley tune-up. When you have them come out to your house, they'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That's the guarantee they make for you. So find them online at rsandrews.com. Couple of more comments. Josiah Hurt, he says, what's my take on this? Is it Jay Shipe saying A&M is going to get crushed by 3 SEC West teams? We do this all the time on this show, where a lot of our commenters, Facebook and YouTube both, they just don't think Jimbo Fisher's much of a coach. Not only do I think that Jimbo's a pretty good coach, I think that's at A&M a pretty good coaching staff. I think Elko, the defensive coordinator, is probably really good. I think the A&M is lucky he didn't leave to take a head coaching job this past offseason. So I just like A&M better than some of y'all do. And if I'm wrong, I'll end up being wrong on that. But I think the A&M benefits from a much easier schedule this year than where they would have been before. A couple more Facebooks, we'll get ready to go. Matt Rugavina says that Tennessee's fights on with the 14 3-star is going to be we back from Jason Aldean. Yeah, they certainly think they are back right now. Very funny to see. Travis McCullough says that Linehan's going to be a downgrade from Joe Brady. I agree with Travis on that. Jarvis Hanna checking out. Jarvis, thanks for being here. Marshall Fleming says LSU's replacing 36 players. He thinks the LSU will lose 4 games because of that. That's a lot to replace in 1 year. Mike Anderson not happy that the Chiefs picked Hilaire over Swift. I think they may end up regretting that. I think that Deandre Swift does have a very good NFL career. Doug Raymond brings a pretty good point. Malzahn averages about $1 million per win. Yeah, obviously he always kind of teeters on the brink of being completely out of favor with his fans. You know, he outcoached Nick Saban last year. You got to at least give him credit for that. I find myself thinking Malzahn's probably a little bit better coach than some people do. I saw that in the Iron Bowl a year ago. But pretty clear he's not producing enough consistent success to satisfy Auburn fans, which makes years like this pretty interesting. Jim and Sharon Caldwell, nice way to close out our program today. They say, hunker down, dogs. Be safe out there. And I think that's a really, really good idea all the way around. Wash your hands. Stay distant to the extent that you can. Do your part. You know, we've all got, I think, responsibility to kind of watch out for each other on this a little bit. Whatever you can do to make someone else's burden a little easier, probably the right thing to do. So let's do that. Let's continue to keep a good thought as we head towards what we hope is the start of the season on time. I love the idea of the Georgia staff and players being back on campus in the month of June, getting ready for a fun season. That is all really good stuff to be able to think about, and I'm proud to be able to do that. Something I'm proud to be able to do on our program here as well is talk to you a bit about the Gator Hater Updater. In fact, how long has it been since those lousy, stinking Gators beat the Georgia Bulldogs? About 1,294 days. 1,294 days, I believe that's right. That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. Georgia enjoying a nice, actually it says 1,293 on here, but maybe I'm wrong. I think it's 194. Either way, it's been a long time. That's good news. Our buddy Eddie wants you to know that. Gator Hater Updater here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Hope y'all have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. We're going to get busy working on a podcast edition of our show. A few things we're doing on the podcast we did not do here on the video edition. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Lincoln Riley's, frankly, there's no other way to say it, attack on the SEC coaches who are trying to come back in the month of June, and his belief that's not the smart thing to be able to do. And very interesting take from an SEC network analyst on what Georgia still needs to do offensively. We'll deal with both of those topics. It's coming up on the podcast edition of our show. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll see you there for that. And then back here on Monday at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, all over again. Have a great weekend, everybody.